Hi everyone, I'm Emil. I'm not from Fun Factory. They make adult toys. We're from Funday Factory. It's a different company.
Sorry.
That's fine. So I'm here to talk to building branded games without getting burnt. A little bit about me. I'm product manager at Funday Factory, and this talk will be drawing on the experiences that we've made with our studio, building branded games for about 6 years. Major corporations. Some of them are still unannounced titles based on TV IPs. Others are Lego titles and co-productions with other studios. One of the games that we've made, and this is a good case study here, and is Lego Star Wars Microfighters. This is an advert game that we did for Lego, where we feature the Lego Star Wars Microfighters products. So here's some of our, we've done a bunch, and this is what will be the basis of the talk in terms of drawing experiences from. So you might be wondering, why even do IPs, and why are branded games even a good idea? So let me tell you. First off, we need to have a shared definition, and I've chosen to go with a fairly broad one. That is IPs that are outside team ownership and/or something that's moved beyond the original platform or space. So for instance, a game that went from console will have the original development team or marketing team assigned, so it won't be developed by your core team. So if you're building something for mobile that came from another space, that's going to be complicated. So if that's sort of the broad definition here. So first off, the power of brands is really strong. I looked through the reviews for Crate and Cruise, which is one of the games that we're really proud to have worked on. And if you look for ads, the most common thread there is that they say, this is a game without ads. And if you look at the app icon, you can sort of get a sense of what the game is trying to sell you. But because the brand is so strong, people don't see it as an ad, which is really fun. And that's also one of the strengths, the benefits of working with IPs and brands. But I dug into some stored data, and these are from January 18th on iOS top grossing. So ask yourself if your studio will be able to compete with FunPlus, Playrix, Peak Games, King, Supercell, and the combined juggernaut of Las Vegas casino games. Because they are the ones that you'll be competing against. The majority of the remaining games are branded games. Here, Fortnite and Roblox are interesting case studies because they've reached beyond their original platform and have actually started to sell merchandise, like Monopoly for Fortnite, and Roblox are actually selling physical toys. In that sense, it's outgrown its original starting point. We also have Dragon Ball Z, Game of Thrones, and Final Fantasy, among others. So this is sort of a really interesting look into how the App Store growth charts is looking right now. In conclusion, app discovery is 100% broken, but if you have an IP or a brand, you get to maybe not care that much, which is really nice. Another reason, there's a bunch of other good reasons. I've listed my 4 here. So another reason is that you get fans, which can translate into UA or lower CPIs if it's a free-to-play game. You also get a world to build on, so you might get assets or stuff to work with. And of course, you also get to tap into one of the most powerful things, which is nostalgia, which is a really powerful tool for you to leverage. So, no downsides. End of the talk. Good talk. Unfortunately, we can't stop here. There's bad things too, and I'm here to warn you about them. So one of the first things I'm going to say is that you should factor in approval time. If you're a small studio and you have a development team and a studio management, if you come across a problem or an issue with your production, you can get stuff approved within a day. You can just go over to your CEO's office and say, hey, we're running into this problem, what do we do? And then you get it resolved. Nice. Then, if you have an external partner or studio, things get a little bit more complicated because then you need to pass information upwards. And it's rarely the development team itself that gets to pass that information along. Often that the studio or the development team takes that onto the management team, which then takes that onto the external partner, and then that travels downwards. But it's still okay, it's still decent. You have approved approval time of about 1 to 2 weeks, defined gates, and shared risk. Things start to get hairy if you introduce an IP holder, because then we're looking around 4 weeks, and the IP holder decision impacts the entire funnel down the line, and your feedback will always travel upwards through the usual gateway through your studio management team, and then all the way up to the external partner, and then maybe to the IP holder or licensor. But there's no guarantee that that information you'll be able to communicate directly upwards. So often you'll get the conclusions or the decisions being made, and the team has to go, wait, no, that's not what we meant. We meant this, but then you can start over again. So then there's another 4 weeks of approval time. So keep that in mind and factor in approval times in your production schedule. A good example was a game that we did for the studio, or a TV network in Denmark, where we made a game for the TV network. We, at some point in development, were getting ready to wrap up on some voiceover acting. We had the original TV show heading into the studio to do the voiceover recordings. 24 hours before they came into the studio, the scriptwriter, we received an angry email and a call from the scriptwriter of the original IP, and he was very upset and approved the script for the voiceover actors, which is a reasonable thing to approve. The problem was the TV network and the IP holder didn't know that that was a term in his contract. So everyone was sort of caught by surprise, and we managed to get him to review the scripts within the 24-hour time frame. It cost money, but we could get the TV network to pay that because they were supposed to keep track of this. But that just goes to show that approval times can also come in with sudden, scriptwriter appears, and you have to deal with that. So to further this point in terms of complexity, I think it's interesting to look at The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead had 2 games coming out. One was from Next Games, and the other was from Scopely. And if you look at the release, that they're less than a month apart. That's really interesting from the point of view that one of these is from the comic book IP holder, and the other is from the TV show, and they're held by Skybound, which holds the rights for the comic, MC, who holds the rights for the TV show. So even for large publishers, this is a space that's hard to navigate. And my take on this is that they didn't know about each other, because it's pretty crazy to launch 2 fairly defined IPs with such short span of time in between them. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is how to get happy developers, or happier. There's a baseline, you got to deal with that. So the first advice is to ask for a single point of contact. If you have an external partner, you might think, great, there's a games team and there's an IP team, and I deal with the IP team and I talk to their producer, and sometimes the creative lead has input. But the reality is often that sometimes you need to talk with in terms of getting finances or getting paid. You need to talk to legal to sign contracts, and while you're in production, maybe 4 months away from launch, suddenly the social media and product print people want stuff from you. And there's an SDK that you need to integrate. Developers in a completely different department. And suddenly you went from having 1 email in your inbox to having 20 every day for months. This is not funny. It's horrible, but there's a way around it. And what I would recommend is to single point of contact. Generally, if you can find someone who understands games, your life will be easier for it, but it's okay to find someone in other departments of the external studio that you're working with. In this example, we've picked the creative lead as the single point of contact, and person's responsibility to funnel in all of the requests coming in from the different departments, and he or she will help set out a plan that will make that work within the time frame and the schedule that your production has. So this is basically the inbox zero management, and it's really smart. You should do it. There's also the point that you might have something that needs to be escalated. So there needs to be an open channel of communication between studio management, the IP holder management, and the team. So if there's a problem in production that needs to be flagged, you need to be able to escalate that, and preferably fairly quickly, outside of the 6 weeks approval time or 4 weeks approval time. Another good advice is when you're at events like this, turn to the person next to you in the room and ask if they with a specific IP. If you're looking to get involved with a specific publisher or IP or brand, talk to someone that's worked with them before and ask how their experience was. What would they have done differently if they'd known what they now know, and just ask for advice. It's a really good idea. Of course, don't break NDAs, but talk. That's a really smart thing to do. Here's a bunch of things that I think you should add to your contract. You need reasonable approval times, no longer than a specific set that depends on whether you're dealing with Disney and Lucasfilm, or if you're dealing with DC, it's going to be different. It's going to vary tremendously. If it's Skybound or AMC, that's also different, right? Another thing is that you need assets delivered within a specific time to request it. You need to agree upon the platforms that you need to support and the hardware specifications. And if you change features outside the original scope, that should be something that you can open up by either party. But if point 1 and 2 are incurred, then that results in longer. That should either increase your budget or reduce your scope. Make sure to get that in the contract. So, great. Now let's talk about how to get happy stakeholders. So, tip one would be to get a very transparent development and process transparency. So here's an example of a game that's totally made up, where some of the things that the IP holder wants is that the hero shouldn't stand so close to that special 3D element. And there's social media department also is asking for Instagram and Facebook videos in 3 different ratios, which would require you to do screen recording in 3 different passes. But the creative lead on your team would like to get more characters and really prefer the previous chicken walk. And then you have an external QA studio banging the door saying they need the build by Friday in order to start being ready for submission. The really nice thing is when you get a ton of input, you just send that over to your one point of contact that you have, remember? And together you will align on the backlog, and then you can call the list of requirements and incoming things to what you agree is important. And if it's really important for the IP holders to get those Facebook videos, and it's more important than to miss the deadline, then that's a decision that you make. So have a shared prioritization document and keep that as a decision log moving forward, because you'll always be able to backtrack. So use your email to send those things out. The other thing is to control the message, and in general with IPs, you rarely get to stand in the room on the east coast of the US when it's being presented, in this case to Warner Brothers Digital. So one thing that we've learned is to cut up videos, pause the video, and highlight what we need feedback on. This controls the delivery of what you need feedback on, so the feedback doesn't go beyond the scope of what you need to hear back on in terms of approvals. But if it's possible, always go there in person. If it's going to cost you some money, the potential downside of getting a rejection, which will then need to go through a new approval process, can often be outweighed by actually going there in person. Also, think ahead. In general, if you can be 1 to 2 months in advance in your production plan, you're in a good place. So this is the set of features that your game have. You might have a core, you might have a set of features, and then more features. And at the top, you might have a bunch of very unlikely features, because if you need to do more and features, there's not time to do more features. But if you send something to an IP holder in the approval deck, and they take out half of your core and 50% and 75% of your features, then there's more features, which is nice. So submit all the things always. So basically, yeah, 3 steps to happy stakeholders. You have a transparent process, you control the message that you send, and you always send your stuff ahead of time. So in summary, should you do IPs, yes or no? Well, the first question you need to ask yourself is, does this fit your studio culture? It's gonna vary a lot depending on your studio, whether you wanna do a game from Kjaehr, or if you want to do a game for Greenpeace. So make sure that the IP or brand that you're finding is something that fits the culture that you have in your studio, and it doesn't turn your happy developers into unhappy developers just because they don't really like the kind of brand or game that you're working on. The other thing is to be open and honest. The people standing on the side of the licensor or IP holder are also human beings, and they also understand that you're human beings. Don't burn yourself because you feel like you need to deliver on a specific deadline. If you feel like a deadline is threatened, be open and communicate that to the IP holder, licensor, or external partner. Otherwise, you can end up burning yourself and just losing the sense of joy in making games. Finally, make sure that what you're doing is something you're passionate and feel like is, for me, making games for LEGO has been an amazing journey. I have 3 kids, and seeing them play games that I've made has meant way more to me than seeing the millions of downloads that we have, because it's my kids playing those games. So make sure that when you set the team on your end in terms of doing development, that it's people who are passionate about making games. If it's making games for LEGO, find a team that's happy about making games for kids. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. So does anyone have a quick question? I mean, I think it's interesting to think about
You know, when you think about brands and IP, I mean, obviously it's like you said earlier, it's this ability for you to be able to compete on a level playing field.
Yeah.
You're spending quite large amounts of money on UA. But is it more than that? Is it about affinity and a kind of a spirit of what you want to sort of communicate? I mean, you got to kind of live and breathe the soul of that brand, don't you?
Yeah, on that, it's definitely also a double-edged sword. So if you're making a game that feels like a cash grab to the fans, that can also be detrimental, not just to you, but also to the franchise. I mean, look at what Bob Iger did with reaching out to EA, asking them to turn down on the microtransactions on 2. That's a case of the IP holder getting very upset with the actions of a developer, where the fans are getting upset to a level where C-level people needs to get involved. So that's obviously a balancing thing that you need to work out. So yeah, that just goes back. You need to be passionate about the brand and can't just go in asking to make a game in the Transformers franchise without having seen at least a bunch of Transformers cartoons and movies, right? So you need to understand what makes the fans tick, because if you don't, it's going to be really make your game, make them happy for playing your game.
My favorite story about terrible games for brands goes back to the old Java days. Someone did Lord of the Rings bowling. Yep, and the bowling balls were the heads of the hobbits. I kid you not. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.